By 1967, the hippie ideologies were beginning to face a backlash from the establishment. Both the tabloids and police were looking to make an example of the musical virtuosos who'd climbed the social ladder and embraced the counterculture. To the British pop press, music and drugs went hand in hand. The News of the World newspaper had found its niche in disgracing and crucifying under the guise of moral concern. The Rolling Stones had built their career on controversy. Manager Andrew Oldham had carefully crafted their rebellious image, so it was no surprise they became an easy target for the newspaper. When the band released their latest single, Let's Spend the Night Together, in January, their suggestive title caused outrage in both the US and the UK press. The powers that be across the pond had an axe to grind with the Stones ever since they publicly spoke about their disgust for the racial segregation they witnessed when first touring America. When the Stones appeared on the Ed Sullivan Show to promote their single Let's Spend the Night Together, they begrudgingly changed the lyrics to Let's Spend Some Time Together. During the performance, Jagger and Bill Wyman rolled their eyes during the chorus, and the Stones were banned from playing the show again. Meanwhile, psychedelic rock was dominating the music scene. The Beatles had released Sgt. Pepper's Lonely Hearts Club Band in May. It was revolutionary. The album legitimised pop music as an art form. In August, Pink Floyd released their debut album, The Piper at the Gates of Dawn. Influenced by the new trend, the group had begun transforming their style a year previous. Now, they felt it was the direction they had to go in. But tensions in the band itself were at an all-time high. They were in turmoil. Their recreational drug use was now causing serious issues. Mick was feeling uneasy with Brian Jones and Keith Richards' reckless use of LSD. He'd left Keith's house in early February, commenting, "This is all getting out of hand." The sessions for Satanic Majesties were sporadically recorded throughout the year. Seldom would all members be in the studio at the same time. In truth, none of them wanted to make the album. They'd turn up to Olympic Studios so late and so intoxicated, many of the £250 a day sessions would be completely wasted. Keith later stated he could remember virtually nothing of the sessions. When they turned up in a relatively sober state, Keith would arrive with anywhere up to 10 people, Brian with another half dozen, and it was the same for Mick. Needless to say, Andrew Oldham hated this. Oldham, who'd produced all their previous albums, would walk out halfway through the album. His eagerness to replicate Phil Spector's production and the fact he was earning more money than the others had ostracised him from the group. He was also undergoing electroshock therapy at the time due to mental health problems. Oldham would leave halfway through the recording. The album would see Mick depart from his usual songwriting theme of unleashing scathing attacks and criticisms of uppity women. The social pessimism that was prominent in his previous work would barely be touched on. He now explored themes of conceptual love, communal living, and the hippie beliefs of positivity rather than ruminating on the negative. Billy Childish later stated of the transition, "They ceased being fans of muddy waters and became fans of themselves." The year it would take to record the album would see Mick hounded by the police, the press, face a 3-day prison sentence, and do battle with the establishment. Keith would attempt to transition into a genre of music that didn't sit comfortably. He would face a 1-day prison sentence, and ironically, in an attempt to bring harmony in the band, would be the one that ended an era for the Rolling Stones. Brian would compose and produce a soundtrack for a film, play a key part in the sonic experimentation of Satanic Majesties, sink further into drug addiction, face a 1-day prison sentence, and suffer a total emotional breakdown. Bill Wyman would end his marriage, compose his first song for the band, become more and more disillusioned with being a Stone, and Charlie Watts would sleepwalk his way through the project. This is the story of the Rolling Stones, their Satanic Majesties request. In In an effort to expose the secret lives of the Stones, in early February, the News of the World interviewed Mick Jagger in a club. There, he confessed to using LSD and was overheard inviting others to his house with the intention of smoking marijuana. The paper printed the story as quickly as they could. The problem was, they hadn't interviewed Mick Jagger. In their incompetence, they'd spoken to Brian Jones. Brian had given full consent when they asked Mr. Jagger for his permission to be interviewed. Afterwards, he regaled them with wild stories. Had the paper researched Mick Jagger, they'd have known he was very careful not to flaunt his drug use, and he would certainly never have spoken openly to a tabloid newspaper. On the Sunday morning of February, Mick began his ritual of gathering the daily newspapers together on his bed before reading them. He always began with the news of the world, mainly because he liked to amuse himself with the stories. But that morning, when he read the article detailing his drug use, he was outraged. The Stones later appeared that day on the Eamon Andrews show. Mick vented his anger at the News of the World, stating none of the accusations of drug use were true, and he planned to sue the newspaper for defamation of character. The problem was, the News of the World as a counterattack now sought to prove Mick was a drug user. Should this be proven, Mick's libel action would fall apart. Sessions begin for their Satanic Majesties on February 12th. Andrew Oldham will again be producing the album with longtime studio engineer Glyn Johns. Charlie Watts features on drums, Bill Wyman on bass, Keith Richards on lead guitar and backing vocal, Mick Jagger on lead vocal, Brian Jones as well as other instruments on guitar, mellotron, sax, recorder and harp, and the session musician Nicky Hopkins will feature on piano and organ. Mick plans the record to be a concept album. The original idea is for the record to be named Cosmic Christmas. They will later decide on their Satanic Majesties request. Mick had chose the title after reading his English passport, which reads, Her Britannic Majesty's Security of State requests. Expectedly, the title caused controversy. Some countries would even retitle the album Rolling with the Stones. The first song they begin is titled Blues 1. No recording of this track exists and hardly any information. It is only documented briefly in Bill Wyman's biography. For the track, they laid down two versions of the song using just a 4-track recorder. After the sessions finish, Mick travels to Keith's Redlands home where a party of friends had gathered to sample a San Francisco native LSD named Sunshine. Unaware of the forces watching his every move closely, Mick was convinced to try acid that day for the very first time. Due to the pair being under surveillance, the police are tipped off and both Stones are busted. Further sessions for the album are put on hold until May due to the Stones' touring obligations. Over the next 3 months, the group's dynamics will change dramatically. Mick, Keith and Brian, in both a desperate attempt to get away from the press and a defiant act to law enforcement, flee to Morocco. Keith later stated their reaction to the pressure they were under was to run away. While in Morocco, Brian Jones' girlfriend Anita Pallenberg leaves him to start a relationship with Keith. This, coupled with the possibility of facing jail time, sees Brian's mental health deteriorate. The irony in this was Keith had originally intended to mend fences with Brian by becoming more involved in his life. In doing this, he'd hoped to strengthen the band, but in spending more time with Brian, he'd become attracted to Anita. After their European tour finishes, Brian is arrested on May 10th. Before he faces trial, he sends his parents a telegram that reads, "Please don't worry, don't jump to nasty conclusions, and don't judge me too harshly. All my love." On the 16th of May, recording for the album continues with the first track of side 2. The song is titled She's a Rainbow. The story is simply an ode to the narrator's object of affection. Seemingly a woman with almost supernatural abilities, the song is an optimistic message of the flower power movement. Nicky Hopkins begins on a compressed piano, Brian then accompanies him on mellotron before Charlie Watts drives the song forward with his drums and Keith strums along on acoustic. As they go through the backing track, they envision the song to sound like a music box. To achieve this effect, Andrew Oldham starts the piano slow before speeding up as if the music box has just been opened. Continuously throughout the song, the music comes to a halt, then starts again from the beginning as if the box is now being opened again. This much beloved song was the highlight of the album. June 12th, the next session is cancelled by engineer Glyn Johns due to Jagger and Richards being unavailable. But as Johns can't contact either Bill Wyman or Charlie Watts, they both turn up to the studio. In an attempt not to waste studio time, Johns asks Bill Wyman if he'd like to record anything. Wyman at this time has been working on a spacey psychedelic track. He'd originally written it on organ and recorded a demo. The story follows a man who wakes up from a dream to find himself in another dream. Nicky Hopkins opens the track on harpsichord, accompanied by Brian Jones on mellotron. Bill Wyman then lets loose on his Ludwig drum kit for the chorus. That day, they lay down a few backing tracks. For the vocal, Wyman is worried. He feels insecure about his voice. He suggests Glyn Johns add a tremolo effect.
In another land, where the breeze and the trees and the flowers were blue.
The song, originally titled Acid in the Grass, is later renamed In Another Land. The song is later played back to the group, who feel it will fit the album's theme and agree to add it. To develop the song, Mick will sing lead for the chorus.
Then I know, was it some kind of joke?
The group later released the single In Another Land in America under the name Bill Wyman. The song is a massive flop, not even reaching the top 40. June 9th, recording continues with the song Citadel. The song is both a tribute to Candy Darling, an associate of Andy Warhol who featured in some of his films and died at 29, and a commentary on the decadent, frantic life in New York City. The song is built around a heavy guitar riff Keith lays down. It's affected later with distortion, reverb and vibrato. The Stones will work on this song for weeks. When Brian attends the sessions, his mental instability is clear to everyone. When Brian arrives, he's so drunk, he's incapable of contributing anything. He sits among his guitars and falls asleep. For the song, Brian adds overdubs on the mellotron, soprano saxophone and recorder. June 19th, the group put the album aside to begin recording their next single. We Love You was written as a thank you to all the fans who are currently supporting them with their legal problems. The song was indeed composed in an uncertain period. The tense atmosphere with the possibility of imprisonment looming is obvious in the music. The group even considered titling the song We Love You Goodbye. The song opens with a piano riff Hopkins had been working on for a while. The rest of the song arrangement was actually worked out in the studio. There was an emphasis on making the track sound as psychedelic and multi-textured as possible. During recording, John Lennon and Paul McCartney of the Beatles visit Olympic Studios to record backing vocals for the song. On its release, Andrew Oldham's production was praised. On the first session of June 13th, all members attend apart from Charlie Watts. They work on the song along with the B-side Dandelion. A week later, Brian suffers a mental breakdown and is hospitalised. He misses a few sessions due to this. On the 19th of July, Jones returns from hospital to finish off the last session for We Love You. On the track, Brian featured on mellotron. In the sessions, there was a delay between hitting the chords and hearing the sound. Despite this, Brian manages to stay in time during the whole track. On the 26th of June, the Stones record company releases a new album titled Flowers. It was made up mostly of previously songs with 3 unreleased compositions. The cover was an attempt to both capitalise on the hippie movement, make the transition to Satanic Majesties' request smoother, and take advantage of the press the Stones were receiving. 3 days later, Mick is sentenced to 3 months in prison and Keith is given a year. July 1st, while the Stones continue to battle against the News of the World tabloid, the Times newspaper comes to their defence. They print a story with the now famous headline, "Who breaks a butterfly on a wheel?" The quote was taken from English poet Alexander Pope. The phrase means to use far more force than is necessary. July 7th, sessions for the album continue with the song "Sing This All Together." It was originally intended as a 12-minute track, but the song was split into one 3-minute 47 track which opened the album and one 8-minute 34-second track which ended side 1. At this time, it was popular to have reoccurring themes during a psychedelic album, and it appears this is what the Stones were going for. The track opens with a heavily compressed piano intro by Nicky Hopkins. Brian Jones then accompanies him using horn effects for the mellotron. Mick's vocals come in before the song escalates to a party-like sing-along to finish the verse. Keith can be heard playing rhythm and distorted lead as the song progresses. The track closing side 1 is an all-out jam. It starts with Mick asking, "Where's that joint?"
Where's that joint?
An obvious attempt to antagonise the police, the tabloids, and anyone else opposing the counterculture. It finishes with a reprise of the first track, albeit more quiet and reflective, as if the party is now coming to an end. Why don't we sing this song all together? Mick later confessed he'd probably started taking too many drugs by this point. While they're recording the song, they ignore Andrew Oldham's suggestions. In frustration, he walks out of the control room and leaves the project. The album had been the first time Andrew had been in the studio where he didn't know what they were doing. He later stated, "I looked at it and I thought, what the f*** am I doing here?" This would be the first album produced by the Stones themselves. Following this, they record what will be the closing track of the album. It's titled "On With The Show." The name also comes from a 1920s movie. The song is much in the same vein of "Sing This Song All Together" and its reprise. A continuous party atmosphere is heard, accompanied by Keith's 50s style lead and what sounds like Mick singing his way through a megaphone.
Good evening, one and all. We're all so glad to see you here.
The sound effects heard at the opening were recorded on the side of the road outside Olympic Studios. Around this time, Brian returns from the Monterey Pop Festival and is hospitalised again due to a nervous breakdown. July 22nd, they begin recording Mick's song "The Lady, the Lilies and the Lake." It's later retitled "Gomper." This was another one to push the flower power message that we should love one another and live peaceful lives. The story follows a narrator high on something, most likely LSD, observing a woman floating in a lake before drying naturally in the sun. The song ends with both narrator and woman in some sort of distress. The sessions by this point have become quite strange. The track begins with Nicky on organ in a spooky, disjointed way. Keith takes over with a lead guitar before the organ and drums kick in. Based on Indian and Morocco themes, it's clear Brian Jones had heavy involvement with the song. On the track, he plays electric dulcimer, bongo drums, sitar and flute. The song basically ends after 2.5 minutes, and the rest of the time is filled with a musical freakout. It was actually a perfect metaphor for Brian's mind at the time. Brian had gone as far as he could go. He would be checking out from this point on. At this time, Brian begins making frequent visits to psychiatric hospitals. When studied, he's found to be in a deeply troubled state. Keith will play Brian's 12-string Rickenbacker in his absence. 25th of July, recording begins for the song 2000 Light Years From Home. Mick had originally wrote the lyrics while imprisoned. The story follows an astronaut flying into space, leaving his home for an unspecified amount of time. As he travels farther from Earth, he wonders how long it will be until he returns, or if he ever will. It's a metaphor for being incarcerated with possibly no hope of being released. The track opens with effects and piano before Keith's muted lead begins. The drums propel the song as Brian's mellotron and Nicky's organ kick in. The song, as heard with previous track, breaks into different sections. At some point, female vocals can be heard accompanying Mick, possibly Marianne Faithfull or Anita Pallenberg. Mick later said the track was more of a sound experience than a song. 6 days later, Mick and Keith's convictions are overthrown due to lack of evidence. 5th of August, recording begins for the song 2000 Man, Mick's futuristic song with the memorable lyrics, "I'm having an affair with a random computer." The story follows a man who becomes so engrossed with modern technology he has lost any need for human connection. Computers have dehumanized people. It's the result of man's obsession to better himself. At the sessions, Brian shows up so intoxicated he can barely hold a tune. His guitar is unplugged without him noticing, and he continues to play in a haze. The song is divided into 3 sections. Keith opening on acoustic guitar joined by Nicky on piano, a lively rock number and a jazz interlude. Following this, their final track, "Fly High as a Kite," later titled "The Lantern," is recorded. Brian at this point isn't turning up to sessions due to his unstable health. For the track, some earlier overdubs are used of him playing organ. The story follows a man grieving the loss of his lover. The lantern is the light he'll pass through when he eventually joins her. The track is heavily driven by Keith's hummingbird acoustic and Les Paul overdub lead. The vibrato and distortion set the mood for the song. Of the track, Syd Barrett stated, "It was one of the underappreciated songs from the album." When the mixing begins, Mick requests Glyn Johns to add a load of strange sounds. Johns comes back with some sound effects, and after Mick listens to the playback, he states, "Great, half a dozen more like that and we're okay." Wind effects are added to "In Another Land," carnival sounds at the start of "She's a Rainbow," church bells on "The Lantern," backwards tapes on 2000 Light Years from Home, and the party atmosphere crowd on With the Show. Mick and Keith are very active in the mixing process. They push Glyn Johns to continue mixing songs for hours when he feels he has it right on the first couple of passes. When they play them back later and compare to John's early mixes, it's agreed his originals were better. Each song is mixed to run straight into the next one. When the mixing is complete, a month or so later, they all feel a sense of relief. August 18th, their single "We Love You" is released. Mick complains the lyrics printed on the single are different from what appears in the song. The song, commercially, is a flop, much to the surprise of the group. Though, when asked about the song itself, Mick plays it down as just a bit of fun. Lennon and McCartney keep quiet about singing backing vocals for the song. If word got out they were working with the Stones, it would break their contract with EMI. A music video for the single is made not long afterwards. It was based on the scenes from the Oscar Wilde trial. Mick appears as Oscar Wilde, Marianne Faithfull as Bosie, and Keith plays Judge Sir Arthur Charles. When complete, Andrew Oldham offers the film to Top of the Pops. It's quickly rejected. At this point, the Stones gather to shoot the cover art for the album. Mick is adamant the cover should be grander and cost more than the Beatles' Sgt. Pepper's Lonely Hearts Club Band. The four are pictured high on LSD as fairy tale characters with mountains visible in the background and planets in view. A 3D effect is added with the four changing positions when the picture is tilted. The cover perfectly captures both the Stones' mood and intoxicated state during that whole period. When asked about the recording of the album, Keith later stated, "We were pretty much the way we looked on the cover." Despite the criticisms, it's one of the most successful in rock history. Their Satanic Majesties Request is released December 8th. The album was at the time dismissed as a cheap imitation of the Beatles' Sgt. Pepper's Lonely Hearts Club Band. This was mainly due to the resemblance in the cover art. Musically, other than being a psychedelic album, it bears no resemblance. The Stones happen to agree with the critics' hatred for the album. To this day, they prefer to forget it even exists. it's barely mentioned in any of their autobiographies. Other than She's a Rainbow and 2000 Light Years from Home, Mick dismisses the songs as all nonsense. But why did the album fare so bad? One view was the circumstances it was made under, the drug trials, relationships inside the group breaking down, lack of a stable producer. Another is the competition it faced later that year. The Beatles had released Sgt. Pepper's Lonely Hearts Club Band and Magical Mystery Tour. The Doors had released their first self-titled album. Jimi Hendrix had released Are You Experienced? But ultimately, it was a matter of the Stones trying to be something they were not. They didn't write highly sophisticated music. They couldn't compose complex ballads like Lennon and McCartney. That wasn't their style. They had found recognition bringing blues to the masses. Jagger's lyrics expressed disillusionment, anti-commercialism and anti-authoritarianism, mixed with blues rock and punk vocals. In essence, going down this road, they were fighting a losing battle. Fortunately, with the passage of time, their Satanic Majesties is finally being looked at as an interesting experiment rather than a desperate attempt at emulating Pepper. Thank you to everyone who supports the channel, and if you wish to donate, it would be greatly appreciated. Just click the three symbols next to the video, then the thanks icon, and choose however much you wish to donate. Everything donated goes directly back into the channel to make better quality videos. As always, thank you for watching and stay tuned for the next video.